She will present on the effects of the native boarding school era and the work to preserve the traditional teachings of the Northern Arapaho to begin the healing journey of the community. She will speak on behalf of the boarding school era, the work she has done to help her community.
So, dos neteena besi neteena. My name is Yufna Soldier Wolf. I am Northern Arapaho. I do have relatives. I'm enrolled Northern Arapaho, but I have many relatives that are Cheyenne, Northern Cheyenne, and Lakota, Nakota, Dakota. I come from a long line of war chief leaders, chief and chieftains, male and female. Today we're so used to the colonial system of patriarchal system, we're forgetting that tribes had a matriarchal system, and that was based upon the buffalo. So today I'll kind of go over a boarding school project, and I'll kind of go over the history, give some background, and come to the contemporary. We actually had made a film about this just recently within the last 5 years. So forgive me that I kind of turn my back on you, but this is a part of who are the Northern Arapaho. We followed the buffalo. It was a way of life for us. Like I said, it was a matriarchal system for the Arapaho. We made food, household goods, everything basically from the buffalo. Slowly, as time changed, our lives changed. Our government system today is a lot of our authority, what we do within our tribe comes from our elders, the elders within our tribe. And then as things moved on throughout history and we were settled on reservations, we were told we needed to become organized tribes. So the Indian Reorganization Act was passed, and our tribe had the ability to decide whether the Arapaho and the Shoshone, who are two different tribes, were to become constitutional tribes. If we were to adopt our own constitutions, that meant that we had our own bylaws, we could have businesses, we could have schools. We decided we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to become constitutional tribes. So we didn't adopt the IRA system. A lot of tribes did. A lot of other tribes follow a constitution. We follow our resolutions, which are our bylaws. They're our standing orders. Our tribal leaders are the ones that get to decide and vote upon how that looks. So if it's everyday business, if it's education or healthcare, it's dictated through those resolutions. So having to be a tribal member, understand in tribal law, be a county and state citizen, and then be a federal citizen, we have a lot to learn, right? So growing up, I had my father lived to be 90. He passed away two years ago, and he had a lot of this knowledge. He remembers driving through Wyoming on a wagon with his parents, going up to Lame Deer, going to Rosebud, going to Ogallala, going to different places. And so driving anywhere with him was like, look, there's Bear Lodge. Oh, look, you see this creek? There was something there one time. And he would tell me, and me being the youngest of 10 children, it was like I was always listening, like all the time. And so partly what I know, I've known through him and through other elders, and the other part is just self-education. I've gone to school at Montana State University. I've gone to school at the University of Wyoming. I went to school for public relations and Native American studies at Montana State University. I also went to the University of Wyoming for anthropology, bioarchaeology, and forensics. And then just recently I got an Indigenous Study degree, and then currently I'm a federal Indian law student. So basically when we talk about the history of boarding schools, we got to talk about the history of why were these kids sent there. So I talk about manifest destiny, how there was a huge land grab at that time, and how after a lot of settlers came to Indian territory, and there started to be a lot of Indian wars, especially here in Wyoming. We have Fort Fetterman, we have Bates Battle, we have Norwood Country. We have all these small battles going on here, predominantly here in Wyoming. And then prior to Battle of Little Bighorn, the Arapaho, Cheyenne, Lakota. After Sand Creek Massacre in 1867, a lot of the Arapaho and Cheyennes were massacred there. After that, we knew it was going to become a lot of a huge increase in settlers coming here. And so prior to the Little Bighorn, the three tribes came together and said, what are we going to do? And so slowly it became, we had to be allies, we had to help each other out. And it was said through our stories that it was something that was planned. So June 25th, 1876, we call it Little Sheep Creek. That's the Little Bighorn. And so a lot of the war chiefs at that time said, you know, like I said, what are we going to do? There's encroachment happening. Different colonels are coming out. You know, there's a huge land grab. And at that time, in 1876, 2 years later, actually in 1877, there was a delegation of Northern Arapaho. Sorry, this isn't going forward. We had a lot of these tribes wanting to go to DC. And so in 1877, the Arapaho always get lumped into as the general, you know, because at that time, all the Indians look the same, right? So one of the things was that if you Google 1877 delegates, a lot of our war chiefs, the Arapaho, are with the Lakota and Nakota, who went to DC. And so after that, they decided, well, there was actually a law, executive order, saying that the Arapaho, the Sioux, wouldn't get their own reservation. And that executive order, basically, there was a promise made to the Arapaho saying you guys are going to get your own reservation, and that never happened. And so after Custer's last stand, after 1877, the Arapaho said, well, what are we going to do? So after 1878, we failed negotiations to get our own reservation, and we end up going to the Eastern Shoshone Reservation, which was currently 4.4 million acres of land from the Fort Bridger Treaty, and that slowly got disestablished over the couple of years, actually, and it went down to smaller and smaller, and right now it's ceded land. So as we continue on, a lot of that history of corralling these children was really like that forced assimilation process. We're going to settle these people. What do we do with their children? And so from that, the Shoshone actually sued the Arapaho for payment, and the Arapaho paid for their own part of the reservation once we were kicked out of Colorado. And so it was all this huge land grab. And so in 1881, the railroad was already going through Wyoming, the reservation, and this was the same railroad that ended up taking a lot of our kids to boarding school. A lot of these children were the first children in 1881 that were taken all the way from Wyoming to Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And they didn't just go on a luxury, train. It was a cattle car. They went as you see them right now. And a lot of the times they went with sacred items. And once they got there, they were basically told who you are isn't right. One of Henry Pratt's things was kill the Indian, save the man. When a long time ago, historically, we didn't have a last name, right? Because we weren't paying taxes. We didn't need last names. The way that our names did change were from your namesake got passed down from name to name. So if your uncle had a name, you had the same characteristics, he would give that name to the little boy. Same thing with the little girls, those names would be passed on. So when these children got sent out, they only had one name. And it was really hard doing the research because once they got there, their names changed. One of the issues I had when I was doing research was finding pictures. So this is an after picture of actually Southern Arapaho children. But as you could see from that picture, they got their hair cut. They got military clothing, right? So as time went on, everything was forced upon them. One of the traumatic stories that my dad would tell, he didn't go during this generation. He actually went at St. Stephen's, Wyoming Catholic school. And it was not a day school, but actual boarding school at that time. And he said that you couldn't talk to your own relatives if you knew your relative was there. They kept you apart. boarding school at that time was really strict. He said that he disliked it. He ran away many times and he had many traumatic stories. So in 1883 to 1914, 42 Northern Arapaho children were taken leave. And a lot of the times, a lot of those elders and our elders today still say that they were like basically like hostages, because they focused on a lot of war chief families, and those are the children that they took. So when they arrived, they were forced not to practice their culture. They couldn't speak their language. The practices of caring for another was taken away. Their way of their dress was also forbidden, and basically losing their cultural identity. So that in a way was traumatic for them too. They didn't speak English. The 3 Arapaho children that we had out of the 42 within that time was Little Chief, oldest son to Chief Sharpnose, who I'm related to. Little Plume, oldest son of Killslas, Columbia Vanderbilt Friday. If you know Chief Friday and kind of know that history, that's the family that he comes out of. That was his son. And then Horace, oldest son of Eagleman, Otto Washington. So all 3 of these children today have huge families that they come out of. And so as I get into it, I'll talk a little bit more how that's important and how the names are important. In 1990, there was a law passed. It's called Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. And what that did was finally set law that some museums, some other places had to start repatriating items. And some of them had to start giving them back. And a lot of the elders at that time were finding out about this law, and they were like, why can't we get our children back from boarding school? You know, that's their law that they made up. Maybe they should follow it. And so over this time, since that time, Sharpnose had always asked for his son. So it came down to, I was the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for my tribe for about 15 years. We end up doing our research. We're on our 5th generation of asking for our relatives back. And it turned out that after a while, the Army, here you can kind of see the bottom. Justin Buller is the Arlington Cemetery attorney. And I guess they have 12 attorneys, and he was the youngest one out of all of them. And he was the only one agreeing like, hey, yeah, we're gonna do this. They were like, you make it up, you do the process, you repatriate. So basically, in the end, he was the one doing all of the work to help the tribes. And so from 2004 up to 2017, we started the process of doing affidavits. That's what they wanted. And it started kicking out that in the end, it was all of these types of negotiations with the federal agency. How would we transport our children back? What did that look like? Are they following military protocol? The disinterment, the labor, the headstones, getting the logistics of the descendants together. So it was a huge job that I was taking upon myself to do this, but all in the aspect of getting our children back. Like I said, this is Little Chief, Little Plume, and Hayes, or Horse. When we got there, after filling out these affidavits, after jumping through all these hoops, it took a while for us to finally get the okay to go there. And as you can kind of see in this picture, you get there and you realize these are babies that are buried in the cemetery, and it finally hits you that the headstones aren't big military headstones, they're like children military headstones. So they're really small. And once we got there, one thing I don't share very often is this PowerPoint, because it's more personal. I have some video and some pictures that aren't on the trailer and on the documentary we made. But one of the things I don't share is how personal it was for me, like heartbreaking and whatnot. But just getting to the cemetery, right, as soon as we stepped in there, I could feel a little kid like kind of grab my hand. And so I was like, you know, like telling myself, don't freak out, you're okay, you're okay. So we got our chiefs there, a lot of our elders who were supporting this and helping me. And within this time, I've lost my dad and we've lost Crawford. We still have Hubert and Nelson. But it was pretty emotional being there and feeling that trauma, feeling that sadness. So as I started, that was a picture of me at the post office. They wanted me to take a picture sending these affidavits. We do this thing where we honor our people when they come back, and it's called the last ride. So each of these children had 3 horses. Each horse had a war bonnet. Each horse had a blanket. Each family of the little boys donated or got something in the end. This is just a picture of me with the Army military. Somebody took this picture and somehow it became like this logo of Carlisle because I had 3 little moccasins on my regalia. This is some of the reburial. I think this is Little Chief's reburial. A lot of the family got to keep the little war bonnets. And then we admonish you never to forget what our elders and children and ancestors had to endure for us to sit here today. Don't take this for granted. Hatina Osa. So I do have some video, but I wanted to just share this really quick.